like to ask you, do you have any closing remarks, any tips, advice for young adults, teens specifically, to garner success in their career, family life, marriage? You have a lot of experience to have an amazing, successful marriage as well as career. What tips do you have in terms of that, the relationship side and the finance side of things?
I think when it comes to a career, I think the biggest takeaway would be.
Welcome everybody to the Minority Mind Podcast. I'm here today with the millionaire financial coach and financial expert here from, initially, I believe it's Iowa, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
And just to get things started, can you tell us a little bit more about how you came up? Tell us a story of how you grew up.
So I grew up in Waterloo, Iowa. I was born in Des Moines, Iowa, raised in the Midwest my whole life, and went away to college, Russ College, Holly Springs, Mississippi, HBCU, and been living in Rockford since I was 21 years old.
21 years old.
A long time ago.
Okay. So growing up, what was the household situation like? Did you grow up, wealthy? Was it, little not too wealthy background?
So my story is a little different. I don't know if I shared this with you privately, but I don't mind being public. I was born into a family of privilege. So my grandparents were well affluent, very highly affluent. My grandfather was a sergeant during World War I. He graduated from HBCU, so did my grandmother, which was unusual back in the early 1900s, black or white, to graduate from college. That wasn't very common. And there were 6 children. My mom was the baby of 6. There was 5 and a 10-year age gap, and there was my mom. And so I was born in 1966, but some circumstances, unbeknownst to my mom, it caused the family was a ripple effect, and the family needed to take me out of that situation and put me with another family. My father was married to another woman. My mom didn't know that. Mm-hmm. And so my mom was as much of a victim as anyone else. My dad was 39 years old. My mom was 20. That was not good in 1966. So right. I was placed in a children's home for the first 2 years of my life. And then the King family got me at age 2 and put me in their foster care for 5 years. In those days, foster care took a lot longer to become adopted. I was adopted by the King family, and 5 years later, at age 7, my last name changed.
Okay.
So my story is a little bit unique. I was raised in privilege, upper middle class privilege, and I was born in that, but I was raised in poverty. And I believe that had a purpose. I believe that had a great purpose on the foundation of my life today and my why. I believe that really shaped my why.
Okay. I appreciate you sharing that. So in regards to the upbringing, when you said that there was issues in the home in regards to infidelity, a lot of young men, especially in today's world where there's a lot of different opinions on what's the right thing to do as a man in relationships. Obviously, you come from a household where you've seen the effects that infidelity can cause in a home. What type of advice would you say, to some kid that may be dealing with that today in his own home,
Well, I will say this, that I was affected by infidelity not knowing that I was affected, because I was in an adoptive situation. At that point, I don't know my biological family. I didn't know what happened until I was in my 30s. That's when I found a lot of that came out. But I will tell you, blood is blood. And sometimes the ramifications and the results of problems move into adulthood. And so, although I was never never into that scenario personally, I'd say the effects are pretty damning. I think for my mom, my mother was a victim, and a lot of people fail to understand the impact that it has on women. Mm-hmm. My mom would have never put herself in that kind of uncompromising situation to destroy another home. She didn't know he was married. My father lied. Mm-hmm. And so, my story is a little different. I wasn't in a situation where I had the same mom and same dad. I was taken from that and placed into something totally different. So, but I think, it's a breakdown on values, a breakdown on not knowing who God is and the purpose of marriage. I would never do that to my wife. We've been together for 36 years. We've been married for 27.
Wow.
I'm consciously aware of what it would mean for my sons. You know, what message am I telling them? So that in itself keeps me in line.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my boys are 25, 23, 21. I would never do anything to hurt their mom.
Right.
Or to destroy how they see me or my father-in-law, who's like my dad. I would never do that.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't do it. I won't do it.
That's really powerful to hear, especially since you have the own personal experience, not only not specifically you doing any infidelitous acts, but specifically you coming from the home and being able to reflect on what turmoil that can cause within the family unit. But just what you were getting at earlier about, you know, the upbringing from the wealthy family, the affluent family versus the poor, not as wealthy family. Can you explain how that's affected your life up to this point and what things you learned from those two different opposite backgrounds?
It was a tremendous effect, and I didn't really learn a lot of it until I was in my 30s. My 30s was very revelatory. With my growing up poor, we thought that was a way of life. Mm-hmm. We were accepting of poverty. We didn't like it, but we thought that was the way blacks were raised. And the few blacks that branched out and made it, if you will, we were just like, man, go for it. We were just so happy for them because they were considered our heroes. Mm-hmm. But poverty was not fun. It's crippling. And I remembered its grip. And I remembered my mom always had favor, especially with whites. And I remember them giving us things and providing opportunities for us that my mom would not have been able to have afforded. For instance, when I went to Catholic high school, I was on a 4-year scholarship because of my grades. My mother cried. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand, what's the big deal? I want to stay in public, but they were giving me something she couldn't give me. And because she knew my background, I didn't know my background. She knew that I was taken from something great and that she couldn't give me what my family could have afforded, my biological family, if you will. And so but there was definitely disparities. I remember going to school and being, I remember my sister and I, we would talk about the rich white people and how they live, and we were so happy for them. We thought that's the way of life. That's how it has to be. And the tree-lined streets and the beautiful green yards and the plushness and just the incredible beauty that we saw in those predominantly white neighborhoods on our way to school. The school buses weren't allowed at the Catholic high school because it was considered a downgrade. So we had to catch the city bus. And I remember the city bus dropping us off at the foot of the hill. And I call it the walk of shame. Mm-hmm. We had to walk up this hill past all this wealth and the luxury cars and just the incredible wealth on display, the predominantly whiteness of the school. And I didn't like it. But that was my first foray, if you will, into wealth and feeling less than and not knowing that I come from that, but feeling slighted. It was really something else. Really something else. Yeah. It was something that I wouldn't wish on anyone, but I had to go through that.
Right. So it shaped how you saw things in terms of, having money and people that didn't have money. What would you say was the turning point or the pivotal thing in your life that happened where you started to see wealth differently as something that you can have versus something that other people had that you did not?
I think when I got out of college and I was 21 and I started my career and my income started to increase. I made was over 6-figure income my entire career. But I think I started realizing that I can have this. It is possible. I was always a hard worker. So what I learned in poverty were my work ethic. That came from poverty. My adoptive mom taught me the power of working hard and really giving it your all. And a lot of that stemmed from her personal experiences of being stripped from education in 4th grade and being placed in the cotton fields of Mississippi and being told at the same time that no colored girl needed an education, but at the same time being told that you're lazy. And something about that really struck a chord in her. It was the root of how she raised us. And so I'd say 22 was a pivotal turning point for me. But even more so when I got in my 30s and I started finding my biological family, and I started really realizing I'm really from this. But I began to see why I had to be pulled out. Because I would have overlooked a lot of valuable people that happen to be poor. There's a lot of value in the midst of poverty, but you have to look for it.
Yeah.
And I really began to see both sides of the fence, and that has really shaped my career, and especially what and why I do what I do today.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And I do want to hit on the you talked about coming to Rockford when you were 21 years old, the Chicagoland area for people that don't know. But in terms of reconnecting with your biological family, how was that whole experience? Can you elaborate more on that?
Oh yeah, that was really scary. I was, I guess, when I got married at 30 years old, and I was 32 when our first son was born. And I remember my wife telling me, you need to find your family. Just for your own edification, you need to find your family. So I went on this, I launched this exhaustive just hunt, if you will, lack of a better word, on where I come from. And I had to start with the courts. I had to petition the courts to first confirm what I already knew, that I was adopted and which county in Iowa it took place. Once I found that out, then I had to petition the courts to unseal my records. And when I asked the county about this, I said, how easy is that to happen? They're like, it's extremely hard, especially in Iowa. It's the worst state in the nation of unsealing records. You just better pray that the judge wakes up on the right side of the bed. And I remembered asking God, Lord, help me. How do I approach this? How would you have me to approach this? Because I didn't know that was not good news.
Right.
And I remembered hearing God say, write a very detailed letter, 2-page letter about your life. And I wanted them to know everything, where I'm from, my background. Here's my resume. Here's my wedding pictures. Here's my pictures of my kid. I am not poor. I have money. I live in a very prominent neighborhood. I'm very well connected. You can see my resume. My resume is prestigious. I come from a very good background. I don't need anything from her. I'm not angry. I'm not upset. I just want to know where I come from. And I just put all that. I wanted the judge to see I'm an African-American professional who is educated. And this is what I'm wanting out of this. I just want to know where I come from. I'm not sick. I'm not deranged. I wish her no harm. And if she decides it's not for her, I'm fine with that. I have an amazing support system through my wife's family. I'm okay. I'm good. I just want to know where I come from. And the judge sent me a letter of response back. Now, this is a state, historically, of all 50 states, is the worst in the nation of unsealing records. And the judge just said, after reading your incredible letter and seeing all the supporting documents you sent me, I am compelled to unseal elements of your record. That was historic. That just doesn't happen in that state.
Yeah.
And medical is not a reason to unseal records. Most people, well, I'm sick and I want to know. No, they don't care about that in Iowa.
Wow.
They side with the biological mom. If the biological mom says, I want my record sealed and I want no one touching, that's the law in that state. And she modified the law for me.
Wow.
And I will never forget that in my life. And so I just couldn't believe it. And so I took that information and I kept going to different agencies and different doctors and different hospitals and different things that get any morsel of information that I could find. But I was born Robert George Hill, 1966. A white nurse named me.
Wow.
My mom didn't know what to name me. And Robert, she said, well, name it for my son. What's your son's name? It's Robert. So when my mom gets the birth certificate, she goes, Robert George. She said, you said name it for my son. His name is Robert George. fine, whatever. So she names Robert George Hill. And technically, when you're taking a baby at birth, you're supposed to get the baby out of there quickly. You don't want the mom and the baby to a bond or attach at all. They allowed me to stay with my mom for one whole day. That was not supposed to have happened. I was the first black born at Iowa Lutheran Hospital, 1966. My uncle, who was a prominent pharmacist, first black pharmacist in the state of Iowa, afforded me the very best care. My doctor lived next door to him, and so he selected my doctor, the best hospital, the best care, the best everything. Blacks weren't born at that hospital in Des Moines in 1966, and I was. So I was born into privilege. I had the very best, but because of circumstances, I was removed, and that was the plan of God. The Lord wanted me to be removed for a purpose. For the purpose that I serve today. Wow. And that is to identify with people and to be used to pull people out of poverty, those that are ready. That's what my purpose is. My why is that. But you can't pull people out of something that you have no knowledge of.
Right.
I had to understand, I had to live that. It was deplorable growing up for us. It was not good.
So through that situation, because I wanted to get more into that, through the situation where you found all those records and, presenting yourself in such a way that where you moved an entire state that doesn't typically give those records out to give them to you, that's an amazing accomplishment, especially when it's something that serious where some people in the situation who don't necessarily know their father or know their mother at all, that is something that a lot of them wish to be able to do. What was it like first reconnecting with your family, reconnecting with them, and realizing exactly who the people were and where you came from?
Well, it was really frightening, and it was frightening because we had a mediator. Goodwill was our mediator. The Salvation Army, was our mediator. And in those days, they ran unwed mothers' homes called Booth, Booth. And Booth homes were all over the country. They don't think they exist today, but they were kind of the mediation between the unwed mothers and children and so on and so forth. So my uncle, who lived in privilege, first black family, West Des Moines, the area, very, very upper crust, upscale area. I had that address listed as well as a place in another place, which was Booth, one of the Booth homes. And until they could transition me. And so, long story short, to move forward, 30-some years later, when I met my mom, it was like looking in a mirror.
Wow.
We looked like twins. And I was really nervous. I was so nervous. And my wife's aunt in Des Moines, who was in social work, connected a lot of those dots. So I really went through every place possible. And I found a lot of very interesting information. It was fascinating for me. The research was fascinating. It was very, very fascinating, very telling, because I just wanted to know where I come from and to see her. And we had the same wants, the same desires, the same tastes. And when we go out to our cars, and she's walking to a Nissan Altima, and I'm going to a Nissan Altima. And our cars were the same year. They were both brand new. And I said, if I just may ask, why did you purchase this car? She said, well, it looks like a Mercedes. And I'm like, that's crazy. It's the exact same reason why I purchased it. And so it was just so fantastic to feel alive for the first time, to not feel like I was a lone island. I was appreciative of my adoptive family. However, I never felt I belonged. I never felt I fit in. Every child sees something about their parents that's what I would say, or that's how I'd feel, good, bad, or indifferent. I didn't get that experience growing up. I didn't get that pleasure growing up. And I always wanted that. I always envied other children and families, and I never felt that connection. So, but and later in life, it was wonderful. And then a year later, I would meet my biological father.
Wow.
And so that was very, my story is very compelling. God gave me 7 years with him, and then he passed away. Wow. His story was just as remarkable. Yeah. His story was just as remarkable. You know, it was just really wonderful to feel like I'm alive and I'm connected. Mm-hmm. And I didn't care about why. I didn't feel, you didn't abandon me. it wasn't done on purpose. Mm-hmm. But I have the maturity and the family support on my mother-in-law, my father-in-law's side, to really help me to handle the truth,
right,
and to not take it personal. Mm-hmm. My mom meant no harm. She's a wonderful, wonderful woman. Wonderful woman. She was a victim. Women had no rights whatsoever. Mm-hmm. They were a victim of their parents. You know,
that's a very powerful story, especially the part you pointed out where not fitting in. You know, finding that place. And you know, a lot of people can really relate to that, because even the ones that sometimes people that do come from the, you know, the typical, the ideal, you know, 2-parent household, some of them don't even feel like they fit in with their right. own family. It's with the world changing, a lot of the time it feels like the people who actually raise you don't really know much about how you're living your life, and the new technologies and things might be looked down mm-hmm. upon. But that's a really powerful story. And all of this happened around what age when you first reconnected? What age was that?
I was 33.
33.
My son was 33 years old. We were newly married. We were only married for at least 3 years. And it was just really very, very, it was very powerful. But, you know, met my brother. There was a whole family. And then on my dad's side, there was a whole nother set of problems mm-hmm. that I was in the middle of. And it's like, because my dad cheated on their mom. Mm-hmm. So I have a sister 5 years older than me and a sister 5 years younger. Same mom, same dad, but then I'm the outside baby. Mm-hmm. So every time they saw me, I reminded them of their dad, and they were reminded of his indiscretions. So they were really picking out their frustrations on me, and mm-hmm. I was the victim. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm sorry this happened. So it was really unfortunate. You know, I think since it's gotten a lot better, but up front it was pretty rough.
Right. As somebody that's I specifically always tell people one of the things that helped me understand mental health and, you know, health mm-hmm. in general is that I've been in the behavioral health, mental health space since I was 18, working as a counselor. And I'm curious to ask you, how was it that you were able to handle the you know, the emotional ups and downs of that mm-hmm. situation, the expectations of like, okay, will my biological parents, you know, hold up to what this, you know, I may have imagined in my head, you mm-hmm. know, even the portion of, you know, you're meeting your dad and, you know, understanding the whole family picture. What tips do you have for people who are in these, you know, dark places to handle their, you know, that emotional roller coaster that can sometimes seem like to be life?
I think what helped me is my relationship with God. I had such a strong relationship. I came into church at 22 years old mm-hmm. Because I'd come from abuse. I'd come from a lot growing up as a child. My childhood was nothing glamorous or pretty. It was mm-hmm. horrible. It was horrible. And so I had to learn forgiveness. I had to learn reconciliation. I had to learn how to be honest. I had to learn how to accept things. I had to learn how to not take things personal. It was almost like I was thrown into a crash course of life. Mm-hmm. So the first 9 years of my life, that's why I didn't get married until I was 30. I couldn't handle it. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of damage that was done. And I had to have my support system, my future in-laws really, truly loved on me and mm-hmm. prayed for me and coached me and counseled me and loved on me in ways I never heard I love you growing up. Mm-hmm. I never had a hug growing up, ever had a hug. Mm-hmm. I was never made to feel important or special or involved or included. Mm-hmm. So we had our own major battles as children. It was 3 of us. It was horrible. So to become an adult and to go into this, they have family meetings. Who has family meetings? Like, oh my God, this is crazy. Or we're going to go Christmas caroling. I'm going Christmas caroling. Can you believe that? I mean, I couldn't believe the difference, the stark night and day difference. And I found myself hanging with them. There's still damage. See, we think sometimes that if I go over here on this side, all is well. No, there's still baggage. There's still letting go. There's still forgiveness. There's still things that must take place to go even further.
Right.
Just because you cross over don't mean you can go further. You still got to cut some ties loose. And of course, more prayer, more believing God, more trusting God, more finding out who I am in Him. And as I did that in my 20s, by the time I turned 30 and got married, not quite out of the woods, a lot further out of the woods than what I was, but I still had more to. Now I've got a wife involved.
Right.
See what I'm saying? And I'm finding out who I am in marriage. And then there's a son. Oh my God, I've got my first son. I can't believe I got a son.
Yeah.
I actually have a son. I'm 32 years old. And he was the joy of my life.
A true blessing.
Oh, you have no idea. You have no idea how much that child was just so, I don't have words. So then to meet my mom, I didn't have to learn to forgive her or forgive the situation. I walked into that with that at the center of my heart. My mom owed me nothing. She's given me life. She could have aborted me. She at least gave me a chance. So I was grateful for her, and she was grateful for the one that raised me. There were things about my life I couldn't tell my mom because I was afraid if I did, she would blame herself.
Right.
And I didn't want her to do that. That's not fair to her.
That was very mature. That was very mature because there are a lot of things that, in general, that sometimes are best left unsaid in order to save people some transgressions. But overall, the message I took from that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is just that as a man, it's not always, be tough and let the emotional things that we're dealing with overtake us in the things that we're trying to accomplish in life, but to address those, that personal growth is necessary in order to have healthy relationships, whether romantically, marriage, or, connections wealth-wise, or developing a career.
That's very true. I even found that even the abandonment issues are so real. When you think about that, when you're in the formative years of your life and you don't have that touch or that hug or that comfort of the mother, when that's been stripped from you, that leaves a lot. There are a lot of elements of who you are, who you're to be shaped to become, that's left out. It's void. So even growing up in my household, not knowing how to relate to people, not being afraid to touch, being always afraid you're going to leave me, you're going to walk out any minute now, and not understanding why you're feeling those feelings, and so I had to come through a lot of that in order to become the adult professional, but it was my support system.
Right.
That was right there, front and center at 22, 25. I'll share with you a story. I remember being 23 years old and me telling God, you speak to everyone but me. What is it about my life you won't take time to talk to? I'm going to open this Bible up, and I want you to speak to me through your word. I feel like I'm owed you to just speak to me through your word. And I opened the Bible up, and I didn't go thumbing through the pages. I didn't go searching through anything. And the scripture leaped out at me. You know what it said?
What was the scripture?
Call unto me, and I'll show thee great and mighty things which thou knowest not. I'll answer thee, and I'll show thee great and mighty things which thou knowest not. Jeremiah 33:3. And I couldn't stop crying. I'm crying and crying and crying. And then God spoke to me after I read that scripture. And you know what he said? I knew you then. And my mind kept flashing back to all these times that I was calling on God and I thought he wasn't answering. He said, I knew you then. I didn't tell you when I'd answer. I told you I would. And that, I'm like, okay, I can stop crying now. I need to stop crying. Okay, I can stop crying. I just couldn't stop crying. But it was through all the homelessness. I was homeless at birth, homeless at 16, homeless from 16 years old till I was 20, 21, 4 drug overdoses, depression, anxiety, you name it. I went through every last bit of that throughout school, throughout my childhood. And no one cared. No one. I was invisible. No one cared. No one cared. No one cared. I never felt loved. I was hurting and no one cared until I turned 22 years old and I met my father-in-law and future father-in-law, and I felt like the whole world just said, ooh.
Wow.
Now he helped me deal with the damage and to come to terms with it and to use it for my advantage. Not to see it as the victim. My mother-in-law would say, why do you have to be the victim? Why can't you be the victor?
That is a very key mindset shift I wanted to acknowledge really quickly. And I believe that a lot of people do go throughout their lives, older people that I would think to look up to. There's a lot of people who go out throughout their entire lives still being the victim. And
absolutely.
What you just said was really powerful because it's obvious by your story, the level of personal growth, the level of self-reflection and honesty you have to do on your own part in order to get to where you are today. I really wanted to take a second to ask you, how does it all get put together? How do you get to the point where you are, put together, a professional individual? I'm only on my way there, and a bunch of people are trying to get to where you are to be presentable. Do you believe that the way you carry yourself has always been there, or was it developed? How did that form?
That's a good question. I believe that through birth, blood is thick. Just like you were destined to be great. See, I knew that when I first met you. You're destined for greatness.
I appreciate that.
Some people in the DNA of their birth, their background, there's elements placed in that is part of your DNA, part of your destiny. And no one can sabotage that but you. And so I believe that I was born, my grandfather was Sergeant Charles Williams. My grandmother was a debutante. My great grandfather was a state senator from Kansas. I come from the roots of greatness. I was born to be great, but God says, no, you must take this detour. Because there are going to be people in your life, you're going to help many, many people. You can't help people if you don't go through. You don't see anyone taking a knife and cutting the cocoon of the caterpillar.
Right.
No, you'll stunt their growth. But it's something about the struggle. The struggle is so important. There's a blessing in the struggle. And the blood vessels burst and the wings come out. The most beautiful creature in the entire world. Many species of the butterfly. But if we cut the cocoon before time, we do harm to the growth of that creature. Same with us. We can see someone struggling, but we must help them through the struggle. Help them to continue down the process of the struggle, because that is where greatness is revealed, through the struggle. And so, because I had the support system intact, and it wasn't easy, they walked me through it, including my wife. My wife is amazing, sir.
I believe you.
She is absolutely amazing. I'll share with you a story. When you get older, you used to have all these stories, Just, I'm almost 60. But my wife, I remember when I first got married to her. We first got married. And there's still some issues. Some things are in my mind. I've come through a long way, though. I'm not the person that she first met at 21 years old, but I've still got a little bit of a path to take.
Mm-hmm.
And I remembered her telling me one time, "You're punishing me. You're punishing me." I said, "No, I'm not." She said, "Yes, you are. You're punishing me for all that you've endured." She says, "And it's not fair." I said, "But I'm not doing that." She says, "Yes, you are. I know you don't mean to, but the reality is you are." She says, "Now, the sad thing about all this is I'm being forced to pay for a crime I wasn't even there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know the people." She said, "All I'm asking you to do is I'll pray for you. I'll believe God for you. We can talk about it. Please don't make me pay for what happened to you. That's not fair to you. That's not fair to me. That's not fair to us." So my wife marrying into to a strong woman was critically important for me, because what it did, it helped me face me.
I've heard that, and this is something that I definitely can see in my own parents, and I can see in the world of relationships, just reflecting from the outside, that a good woman will always reflect back the flaws of her man.
Absolutely. It's
and
important.
It's up to you as the man to see those flaws and determine whether you're going to fix those things or whether they're going to tear down the relationship as a whole.
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
a very powerful testimony that you have there with your wife.
Yeah, 30 years old. She was 29, but she helped me, and then when my boys are born, and my sons know my entire life, eating out of the garbage cans at 17 years old to survive.
Mm-hmm.
The garbage cans. Who, why? But look where I'm at today. My resume is illustrious, sir. It's illustrious. God has blessed me. So I owe much to people.
Mm-hmm.
All the ones along my journey that were there coaching me. Some were short-term coaches and some were long-term. Mm-hmm. And some just said, "Baby, you go make it. Go head on." I needed that to get to my next level. That may seem insignificant, but it was mighty and it was very significant. It was a part of my development.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter what role they played, I had many coaches along the road and still do. Still
Right.
do. And I'm grateful.
That's great. Turning back to, I want to hit a little bit more on the aspect of your career, because that to see and hear your personal development, your growth from being a child to, the professional man that you are today. I'm very curious to hear what your thoughts are on picking a career, because from my understanding, I did see doing some research that you actually went to school for modeling and fashion at one point. So was this always the plan to be a millionaire financial coach? Was that the plan initially?
No, it was called being confused and not knowing who I was. That's what I called it. I'm like, you wouldn't see that. So, so yeah, I did a stint with modeling. It was really, I've always been a person that wanted to contribute.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at it more of as a contributor. And so you heard of the story Carson Perry Scott?
Yeah.
I did a lot of work with Carson Perry Scott.
Wow.
So I was like 17, 18 years old, and I was working, it was a youth group with this department store that was raising funds for Junior Kidney Foundation. And I thought, you know what, I want to do this. I want to give back. Modeling was just a part of that. And then I went to Plaza 3 School of Modeling in Minneapolis for a stint, and then, of course, went to college and for my degree. But I thought I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be an archaeologist. I was very, very smart. I was very smart, unapologetically smart. Mm-hmm. I wanted you to know I was smart. I felt that was the only thing I had. School was my escape from madness. Mm-hmm. So whereas most kids hated school, no, I loved it. That was my escape route from madness, from insanity. And so I leveraged that. And I felt like if I fail school, I will no longer have the very thing that keeps me happy. And so I loved school, loved everything about school. And so that became my central focus, my theme. And so that pushed into my career. And my career, I went into sales not realizing that, God, I kind of like this. I'm helping people. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking out of the box, and I'm figuring things out. And so that kind of went off into Pioneer Life. I worked at Pioneer Life. That was my first real professional position right out of college, and I was the first manager down there. You weren't even born, Ben, but this was a large insurance company here in Rockford. There was like 1,700 employees. I was the first black male manager there. There's a black woman already there, but never a black male. I was the first black male manager, and had a small unit, and we were. It was awesome, and that went off into MetLife and other parts of my career. So I really, really enjoy what I love what I do. I don't like what I do. I love what I do.
Yeah, I can tell by how you treat everyone, you know, from clients to people you meet. With you going through the avenues you did to find your career, do you have any advice that you would give to any young men or women or people just trying to figure it out that may not know exactly what they're passionate about, and they may be trying to just find out what they should do?
You know, I've mentored many young people, young African Americans in financial services. I've had many adults, several doctors here locally. Their children wanted to go into finance, and I took them under my wing and I mentored them. Names that if I named you would know. Your pastor's two sons were definitely two people that I adored and I loved and I mentored in the career, and they've went off to greater things. And so I've always had a passion for young people. Even on my team right now, I've several young people that I'm mentoring personally right now, and I feel I have an obligation to give to them. I feel that when I was coming along in my profession, there was a lack of black polished professionals in my industry. And so I didn't have that perspective to gain from. And now I want to give my young African-American professionals, the ones that are 20, 21, 22, 23, the polish, the different moving parts, not just the side of the career of products and how to do and illustrations and support and all that. That's great. That's necessary. But as a black professional, you need to see what were your struggles. How did you encounter racism? How did you encounter jealousy? What about the people that envied you? How do you handle black clients? How do you speak? Why are these important? What about the inequities? It's a lot of inequities for a black perspective. It's much inequities because the playing field is not even. Look at our First Lady, Mrs. Obama. She made that very clear that being a black First Lady, she had to almost be perfect. Perfect. There was no wiggle room. There was no room for error. There was such an unfair expectation of her. It was incredible. I'm not comparing myself to the First Lady, but I'm saying that I understand what she went through because that's the same way in this career here.
Right.
You know.
So do you believe that a lot of the career and finding yourself a career to pursue starts with developing the soft skills, the skills of presenting yourself, the skills of understanding how to treat people?
Yes. Because
ultimately that's the message I took from what you were saying. I wanted to make sure you were clear on that message.
That is true. Also, what to do, what not to do, how to handle different things as problems arise. And the problems aren't the same as our white counterparts. You know, what happens when you're the only black person in the room? You know, I had to learn how to speak to the specific audience. I had to learn how to walk bold, how to be courageous, even though I was the only black in the room. You know, there was a lot of things. I'll share with you one thing. There was a gentleman, one of my old bosses at MetLife, and he literally said, "Robert King, you come so highly recommended. Your resume is awesome." He said, "But I've got one question to ask you. Are you going to take me to the ghetto?" Is this a trick question? You know? And at first I'm thinking, okay, well, a couple of thoughts came to my mind. Number one is, what's giving you the impression that I want to go to the ghetto?
Mm-hmm.
Am I limited only there? And then the second thought came to my mind is, and if I did, would that really be a problem?
And who was this individual to you at the time?
My manager.
They were the manager.
He was my direct manager. And he literally just was fearful that I was going to take him to some seedy part of town. And I couldn't believe that. But of course I gave him a corporate polished answer, of course.
Yes.
And so I learned that you don't retaliate with words. You retaliate through your work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I learned to become the very best that I could ever be. I read every prospectus. I read everything. I asked people if I go on your appointments. I'm the only black out of 137 people. And I learned, and the youngest in the entire room. Mm-hmm. And, can I just go to an appointment with you? I'll be a fly on the wall. I just want to take notes and just learn and absorb. And I did. I said nothing. I just took notes and asked questions and disseminated and just really tried to understand that's really neat how you said that. Can I borrow that? And I began to make their dialogue and their everything my own. Mm-hmm. And that's how I grew in the industry. And I would wind up beating them at their own game. I was top 5 in the entire Midwest for MetLife in sales in my 20s.
Wow. You did say that you moved to Rockford at 21. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that it is a key thing that people need to do, especially young adults, to move out of their comfortable environment to find an environment where they can flourish and grow in? Or do you believe that's something that, just particular to you?
I think that depends on that person and where they're going. I don't believe everyone here at 21 should leave. I think some people need to stay. I think if everyone left, what would that mean for the rest that stayed? Sometimes God puts things in your DNA that's necessary and indicative for where you're at now to help people all grow. And so I think it just depends. There's no one size that fits all. It's all based on where are you going. However, there are some people that need to go and flourish, and some people go experience and come back. Mm-hmm. That's also very necessary. Right. So they can bring other perspectives home. My wife did that. My wife left and she came back. She went over to college. She experienced life and she came back. So when she was 29, when we got married, she was 29 years old. Mm-hmm. She had some experiences under her belt to bring back other perspectives, other ideas, other philosophies that now have shaped her into the woman she is today.
Wow. That makes sense. That does make sense. I know that sometimes, in this day and age of technology, a lot of people get stuck into the cut and dry rules that maybe one 30-second clip told them they should leave their hometown, so they think they should leave their hometown. But it just goes to show that, the key thing about being successful or building a successful mindset in general is just being understanding of the situation, understanding that, for someone's situation that may be the case, other people, maybe you have the tools you need right in your backyard to succeed. So we have gone for a while with this interview, but I would like to ask you, do you have any closing remarks, any tips, advice for young adults, teens specifically, to garner success in their career, family life, marriage? You have a lot of experience to have an amazing, successful marriage as well as career. What tips do you have in terms of that, the relationship side and the finance side of things?
I think when it comes to a career, I think the biggest takeaway would be to make sure you're coachable at the drop of instruction. I think too many times people in general, not just young people tend to overthink processes, and they want to understand the coached message before they will move in it. You waste a lot of valuable, precious time. I think that that we must be coachable at the drop, at the speed of the instruction. And when you do that, you think about this, you're climbing Mount Everest. And the higher you go, the more difficult it is to breathe. Mm-hmm. So if you're busy with all the talking and all the questions, sometimes it's not, there are many lessons. Some lessons must be taught, and some lessons must be caught. I can want to teach you so bad, but there's some things I can't teach you. You must catch them yourself. But you must be in the right environment to catch them. Sometimes we're in the wrong place with the wrong crowd at the wrong time trying to catch the right message. I don't want to have you on. I get it.
That's
but like
powerful.
I said, it's true. And so it's important to be in that right atmosphere that can foster growth, that can stimulate growth, where you can not only grow yourself, but you can also help others. And as you help others, someone's there to help you to your next level. And you pull someone else up, and they're pulling. It's a push-pull system. Mm-hmm. As you push someone else up, someone's pulling you up. Push-pull. And we become selfless in that environment. So I think that's the biggest thing that I would say. I think when it comes to life, I think God first. It has to be. He has to be. You cannot live life and do life without him. Mm-hmm. Many people have tried, they fail. Mm-hmm. It's impossible. It's supposed to be impossible. We were never designed to be lone islands. Mm-hmm. We just weren't. And so understanding that and accepting that truth can save so much time and derailment. Mm-hmm. Because when you derail, others around you have nowhere to go.
That is very powerful. I like to, when I speak on terms of, my religion and religious practices, I always talk about at the bare minimum, you need God to silence your ego.
Yes.
Because ego goes a long way when you start to feel like you don't need anyone's opinion on what you're doing. You don't go seek that opinion of others. And at best, growing up and God silenced my ego of realizing, you reap what you sow. You treat people as you want to be treated, and that does come back to you, whether you want to call it karma because you're not Christian or whatever you want to call it. Humbling your ego and realizing that you are not the only person affected by your decisions is a really great message. And even though we did not talk about this heavily, I did want to ask you about health, because that is a major part of what I try to instill in mentees and things like that. What do you do to practice health from the perspective of right now? Because one of the big things I do, I'm constantly active. I try to set that example, and I grew up in a family who had, I have a lot of 7-foot cousins who are, overweight, and a 7-foot individual being overweight is very dangerous for knees, heart, everything.
Absolutely.
So I really harp on health, because health is one of the things I find for me to be personally selfish, because I've lost a lot of people due to health conditions and things like that. So I try to, be selfless by taking care of myself. What do you think is something that you do now to prioritize your health, and something you could do better to, help, that something that you wish you were doing younger that could have probably prevented things in the later years?
So I had to laugh because before the pandemic, I was really good. When the pandemic hit, I don't know, I think I was like, you know what? I don't know. I'm just kind of sitting at the Zoom and I'm just tearing this food up. Yeah. So I've gained more weight than this is the biggest I've ever been, literally. I was always thin, just like you, and, but, nevertheless, I really try to eat good and get good rest, and kind of get more into that regimen of things. I'm very blessed. I got good genes. So longevity does run in my family. Good health runs in my family. However, even in our older years, I want to maintain that. And so I think maintaining that is the key to even going further. I'm going to tell you something. Brother, I'm going to be 70-some years old traveling the nation.
Yeah.
I promise you I am.
Yeah.
I'm going to be 75, 76 years old, traveling the nation, helping young folks out, touching lives. I promise you that I enjoy that. That keeps me going.
I can see it. I know that specifically a lot of people online will say you're going to have to lose sleep. Do you follow that narrative? Some people believe that you have to lose sleep in order to achieve success. Do you believe that's true?
Well, let me say it like this. I heard a gentleman one time say that some people, rich folks, I take on the characteristics of the wealthy people, rich people. Rich people aren't sleeping 8 hours a day. What are we sleeping 8 hours a day for?
Mm-hmm.
You know, there is stuff going on. I don't need 8 hours of sleep. I just need to be rested in the time that I'm asleep.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I'm six hours, I'm good. I'm ready to move. You know, and I eat well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't drink. I have not had any alcohol in 36 years.
Okay.
I don't smoke at all. I do no drugs. It's hard for me to take an aspirin. So because of that, I don't have those issues with my liver, my kidneys, some people, it just dries them up. I'm 57 years old, sir.
Mm-hmm.
I feel wonderful. So I don't have those kind of habits at all.
That's great. That's great. To sum it up, you develop your mindset and your character and your behaviors to think and behave like the minority of people do, the successful minority.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And I also speak the word. You can speak the word of God over your life and things will line up the way it's supposed to.
mm-hmm.
And there's a scripture that says, speaking things that are not as though they were.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a big believer in positive speaking, affirmations. I speak my affirmations out twice a day. I speak them out loud. My goals, I don't speak out my problems. I speak out my goals. Most people speak out their problems. When you speak out your problems, they become you. You become the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And if you speak out your goals, they take life. And I think a lot of people could learn a lot from that.
That's beautiful. I appreciate you coming on to the podcast, the Minority Mind Podcast, a successful episode with Mr. King. I appreciate you coming on again.
Thank you, sir.
I really do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We're all good?